Most men won't say it out loud, not to their friends, not to their partners, and sometimes not even to themselves. But behind the silence, beneath the surface of everyday intimacy, lies a hidden world of desires, raw, unscripted, and deeply human. These aren't just fantasies, they're unspoken needs, quietly shaping how men experience connection, passion, and trust. And the truth is, if you really want to understand a man, not just how he performs, but how he feels, you have to be willing to go where the words stop and the truth begins. Many men crave emotional validation through physical risk, though they rarely articulate it, even to themselves. This isn't merely about pleasure or thrill, it's about something deeper, something tied to vulnerability, trust, and the ancient architecture of male psychology. At the core, physical risk in a sexual context, whether it's roughness, dominance, or pushing boundaries, represents a profound test of emotional connection. It's a way to answer an unspoken question. Do you trust me enough to let me lead you into the unknown? When a man engages in acts that carry symbolic danger, gripping tighter, taking control, whispering darker desires, he's not simply indulging in fantasy, he's probing the depth of the bond. He's asking without words if the woman beside him will surrender to the moment without shame or hesitation. This surrender isn't about control in a toxic or manipulative sense. It's about mutual vulnerability. For him, the risk isn't only physical, it's emotional. If she recoils, mocks, or resists without understanding, it registers not just as sexual rejection, but as a personal invalidation of his nature. This is why many men hesitate to speak these desires aloud. Society often conditions them to suppress any instinct that might seem aggressive, primal, or dangerous. But those instincts, when expressed respectfully and consensually, are not shameful. They're ancient and deeply human. Men often walk a psychological tightrope. On one side is the fear of being seen as too soft, too passive, too disconnected. On the other is the fear of being seen as too much, too intense, too needy, too animal. And in the bedroom, this tension is magnified. So, they remain silent. Yet the irony is that what many women crave is precisely that raw, unfiltered expression of masculine energy, so long as it's rooted in care, presence, and mutual respect. The man wants to feel that he can embody this archetype without being judged, without being labeled. He wants to know that his darker desires can coexist with love, safety, and intimacy, that his urge to throw his partner on the bed, to take her breath away, can still live within the sacred space of a trusting relationship. This desire for physical risk is not about danger, it's about depth. It's a psychological reach toward the edge, where the real stuff lives: trust, intensity, emotional exposure. The bedroom becomes the battleground for something far more than sex. It becomes a space where a man quietly seeks to be seen, accepted, and desired in his entirety without conditions. Many men secretly long for their partners to take the lead in bed, yet very few will ever say it aloud. This isn't because the desire isn't strong, it is, but because the cultural narrative surrounding masculinity has made it difficult for men to express a need for initiation without feeling weak or emasculated. From a young age, men are taught to pursue, to conquer, to act. Women are taught, directly or indirectly, to receive, to respond, to wait. Over time, this conditioning builds a silent expectation. He must always make the first move, even when he doesn't feel like it. And he must do so with confidence, without hesitation, and without needing anything in return. But the truth is, many men find it deeply affirming, sexually and emotionally, when a woman takes charge, when she undresses him without waiting, when she straddles him without asking, when she whispers what she wants without apology. These moments break the pattern and disrupt the quiet exhaustion that comes from always being expected to initiate. In those moments, he doesn't feel less like a man. In fact, he often feels more desired, more chosen, more wanted, not because he took something, but because something was offered freely. The desire for female initiation isn't a cry for role reversal. It's a hunger for balance. It's about knowing that his partner doesn't just respond to his desire, but feels her own, strongly enough to act on it. And that action carries immense psychological weight. When a woman initiates sex, it says, "I want you," not because you asked, not because you worked for it, but because I choose to. That kind of affirmation strikes a deep chord in a man's sense of worth, especially in a world where his emotional needs are often buried under layers of stoicism. Yet most men won't express this need, not because it's unimportant, but because they fear what it might imply. They worry they'll seem lazy, unmanly, or too sensitive. They worry their partner will misinterpret it as disinterest or weakness. So instead, they wait silently, hoping that once, just once, she will surprise him. She will grab his hand, pull him close, and take control. Not for performance, not out of obligation, but from genuine hunger. That moment, brief as it may be, speaks volumes to the part of him that rarely gets fed. It tells him that he is not only enough, but that he is wanted, pursued, and irresistible without having to prove anything. Many men are drawn to scenarios in which a woman willingly surrenders control, not because they want to dominate for its own sake, but because such submission signals something deeper: trust. When a woman chooses to yield, to be guided, to let go in a moment of intensity, she's communicating more than just physical openness. She's expressing faith in her partner's judgment, strength, and presence. For a man, this kind of surrender is not about control or power in a crude sense. It's about being seen as capable, dependable, and deeply connected to her safety and pleasure. This dynamic speaks to ancient psychological structures, where the man is the protector, the initiator, the one who moves into the unknown and brings order. When a woman relinquishes control in a sexual context, it activates that structure within him. It awakens an internal narrative where his strength and assertiveness are not just accepted, but welcomed. And in that moment, he feels both needed and honored. Not because he forced anything, but because she gave something that cannot be taken: her trust. The mistake many people make is assuming that submission is weakness or passivity. It is not. In fact, authentic submission requires immense strength and clarity. It demands awareness, confidence, and choice. When it happens willingly, with presence and enthusiasm, it becomes one of the most powerful gifts a woman can give. It tells the man that she feels secure, that she recognizes his leadership not as control, but as care, that she knows he will not misuse what she gives, but will protect it, honor it, and elevate it. This is why many men secretly desire this dynamic, even if they never speak about it. They may fear being misunderstood, labeled as aggressive or insensitive. They don't want to be seen as someone who craves power over a partner, but rather as someone who wants to be trusted with that power in sacred, intimate moments. And because our culture often reduces male sexual desire to something simplistic or dangerous, they stay silent. They suppress the longing for a woman to say through her actions, "I trust you to lead me. I trust you with my vulnerability." In that surrender, a man doesn't just find pleasure, he finds purpose. He feels validated in his masculinity, not as something to be feared or restrained, but as something to be welcomed and integrated. And for many men, that quiet permission to be fully who they are without judgment is more arousing than anything else. Taboo scenarios hold a powerful place in the male psyche, not because men are inherently drawn to the forbidden for shock value, but because the forbidden often symbolizes something far more ancient and psychological. These scenarios, role play, public risk, dominance games, even morally ambiguous fantasies, are not about disrespect or deviance. They are symbolic expressions of deeper desires, rooted in archetypes that have existed for centuries. Men are often drawn to these fantasies because they echo primal stories: conquest, rebellion, secrecy, and risk. They touch on universal themes that have shaped how men understand their place in the world. When a man fantasizes about something taboo, it isn't necessarily about the literal act. It's about what that act represents: unfiltered passion, the collapse of control, the merging of chaos and order. In daily life, most men live within structures that demand constant self-regulation. They must control their urges, temper their ambition, behave ethically, and remain composed. But in the erotic realm, the rules bend. That is where fantasy becomes a form of freedom. It becomes a space where the man can explore the parts of himself that are rarely invited into the light, where the subconscious is allowed to speak. These fantasies also often contain an element of transgression, not because men want to cause harm, but because crossing a line, imagined or real, creates a heightened state of awareness. It's in these moments of psychological intensity that erotic energy often peaks. The brain lights up not only from arousal, but from alertness, anticipation, and emotional rawness. These conditions are fertile ground for deep sexual connection, provided they are grounded in mutual consent and emotional safety. Most men won't speak openly about these desires. They fear being judged, misunderstood, or even shamed. They know the wrong words can destroy trust, so they often remain silent. But the truth is, these fantasies aren't a sign of disrespect or deviance. They are symbolic messages from the deeper layers of the psyche, asking to be explored, not blindly acted upon. A man who longs for a taboo scenario is not necessarily asking for the act itself. He is seeking the feeling that the act represents: wildness, surrender, danger, and intimacy unfiltered by social niceties. When that desire is met with curiosity instead of judgment, it opens a door to profound connection. It allows a man to be fully known, not just in his polite day-to-day persona, but in the hidden architecture of his mind. And in that space, trust deepens, not because boundaries were broken, but because the truth was welcomed. Many men hunger for praise, admiration, and erotic language in bed far more than they are willing to admit. This need isn't superficial or egotistical. It's tied to a deeper emotional truth. For many men, sex is not just a physical act, but a space where their worth, desirability, and masculinity are either affirmed or questioned. Yet while women are often encouraged to express themselves during intimacy through moans, compliments, and emotional connection, men are typically expected to be silent, performative, and stoic. They're told to know what they're doing, to take charge, and to be competent without ever needing feedback. This cultural silence deprives men of one of the most powerful forms of connection: verbal affirmation, erotic praise, saying things like, "You feel so good," "I love when you touch me like that," or "You're driving me crazy," does more than stroke a man's ego. It tells him he is wanted, that he is doing something right, and that his presence matters. It validates his effort, his energy, and his focus. In a world that often reduces male value to performance, these words become nourishment. They cut through the fear of inadequacy and replace it with certainty. You are not just accepted, you are desired. Most men will never directly ask for this kind of praise. They may feel embarrassed, believing it makes them seem needy or insecure. They worry that asking to be praised diminishes their masculinity, even though the exact opposite is true. In reality, erotic language helps build the confidence that allows a man to give more, explore more, and open up emotionally. It creates a feedback loop where both partners feel seen and appreciated. When a woman uses her words to express genuine admiration, it taps into a layer of intimacy that physical touch alone cannot reach. Erotic language also provides guidance. Men often want to know if what they're doing is working, but they may not ask outright. When a partner responds with moans, whispers, or direct feedback, it becomes a roadmap. It shows what brings pleasure, what creates connection, and what deepens the moment. Without it, a man can feel lost, unsure if his effort is meaningful or just routine. the silence becomes deafening, and the experience begins to feel transactional rather than shared. To be spoken to with desire, to be praised and encouraged, reminds a man that he is not just a participant, but a source of passion. And though he may never say it, he listens closely to every word, searching for that signal that tells him, "You see me, you want me, and you're here with me completely." For many men, variety in the bedroom is not just about novelty or thrill-seeking, it's about maintaining a sense of psychological vitality. Routine, predictability, and repetition can slowly erode desire, not because the partner has changed, but because the experience becomes too familiar, too scripted. Men often associate excitement with unpredictability, and when intimacy begins to follow a fixed pattern, the sense of erotic tension begins to fade. This isn't a reflection of dissatisfaction with the relationship itself, but rather a response to how the mind reacts to sameness. The male psyche is wired, in part, to respond to challenge, to risk, to uncertainty, especially in intimate contexts. In a relationship where safety and comfort are rightly prioritized, it's easy for that unpredictability to disappear, but without it, many men feel a subtle loss of intensity. They may not be able to name it, but they notice it. The desire is still there, but it becomes muted. What they often want, without saying so directly, is a break from the expected script, a moment where the rules bend, where spontaneity replaces routine, where the energy shifts in a way that feels raw and alive. It could be as simple as a change in location, a new form of touch, a whispered suggestion, or a role play that breaks character. It doesn't need to be extreme, it needs to feel unexpected. This craving for variety is not about avoiding commitment or seeking something external. It's about keeping the internal fire alive. When a woman introduces something new, even in a small way, it signals engagement. It says, "I'm still curious about you. I still want to explore." That kind of energy doesn't just excite a man, it reassures him. It tells him that the relationship is still growing, that it's not static. And in that growth, he finds space to express different sides of himself, some playful, some primal, some deeply vulnerable. Men often won't voice this need for variety because they fear it will be misinterpreted. They worry it might sound like criticism or that it will create insecurity or tension. So instead of asking, they suppress the desire and hope for change without requesting it. But the truth is, variety in intimacy is not a threat to stability. It's a form of emotional nourishment. It keeps both partners awake, alert, and responsive to each other. It brings freshness to the familiar, allowing new dimensions of attraction to surface even within the most committed bonds. And for many men, that sense of unpredictability is not about chasing fantasy. It's about staying deeply connected to the reality of passion. When you strip away the cultural noise, the ego-driven posturing, and the silence born from fear, what becomes clear is that most men aren't looking for domination, control, or constant novelty for its own sake. What they truly crave, quietly, often secretly, is depth, affirmation, and the kind of connection that speaks to both their body and their psyche. The dirty things they desire in bed aren't just about sex. They are expressions of trust, vulnerability, and longing to be seen without judgment. They want to feel wanted without always initiating, to be praised without having to ask, to explore the edges without being shamed, and to offer their strength only when it's welcomed with willing surrender. These desires live in a space that is both erotic and emotional, primal yet deeply human. And when a woman meets a man in that space, not with fear or obligation, but with curiosity and openness, it doesn't just awaken his body, it awakens his soul.